Hey everyone, so this video is by request. Someone would like to see a database for a small manufacturing company. In short, when an object is ordered to be manufactured, they want their on-hand supplies to be reduced by a corresponding amount. Like say a cell phone is going to be made. Well, you should have one less screen on hand because it's being used for the cell phone. You should have, say, 4 less memory modules, so on and so forth. So how do we do this? We need 3 things. We are going to have a table which is going to store your various supplies. We're going to have a form that is indicating how much of each supply is going to be consumed. And then we're going to have what's known as an update query that updates that table. So the update query basically takes criteria that's provided to it. That way it can identify which records need to be updated. It also indicates which field needs to be updated and by what value. So is it being updated to a different string or is it a calculation? In this case, it's going to be a calculation, and that field gets reduced. So let's start by creating the table. And this is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do because usually with my database projects, I go right into the final form. And this is going to be a little bit more iterative because there's a little bit more data moving around than normal. And I really think you need to see that. And then you can just put your own UI on top of that to try to hide it away from the end user. So create table, view, design view. It wants a name. We'll call this supplies. I'll leave this as a primary key. Really doesn't make a difference. Often I shut it off and it confuses people, so we'll leave it as primary key. So what's the first field going to be? It's going to be the actual supply. And therefore, this will just be short text. It's just a name. Next field will be the supply amount, AMT. So the corresponding amount of that, and this will therefore be a number. In your database, you'll probably have lots of other fields like who orders it and things like that, or who supplies it rather. So you're going to have all kinds of information that you're going to have in this table. I'm just showing the bare minimum for this functionality. So we close this. Do you want to save the changes? Yes. So now we have our table. Now we just need to take a minute to populate it. So we'll open this. And rather than putting in specific resources, I'm just going to use the word resource. Reason for that is because often I'll show how to do something with a database, like here's how to do a database to track your DVDs. And someone comes back and says, well, I don't track DVDs, I track books. The functionality is almost identical. It's just different data points. So I'm not going to use actual supply names. I'm just going to say resource A. And even though you should not use spaces in your column names, the actual data can indeed have spaces. That's fine. And I'm just going to, not randomly, but I'm just going to put in some numbers here that really don't matter. We just want to be able to differentiate them. So resource A, resource B, 1,000, 200, resource C, whatever, 600. And we'll stop at resource D. That should be sufficient. Now, for your database, clearly you'd have to keep increasing this for each and every resource that you wish to track. So there's our table, and that has the supplies. Now let's create the form. So we click on Create. Blank form, as typical. I'm going to shut these off. Really doesn't matter for this demonstration, but it's a good habit to be in. So view, design view. The form is selected. That's what the dot up here means. We go to design. We want the properties of this form. And for format, I'm just going to come over here. And for record selector, I'm going to set to no. And navigation buttons I'm going to set to no. Again, for this particular project, it doesn't matter, but you always want to make sure you lock down your database and you don't allow for navigation that's unintended. So what we're going to do here, we're going to put in the fields that will then have the criteria for which records need to be modified. And as we said, each record is a resource. So what we'll do is we'll take a text box, and we'll just draw it out. And we'll take another text box, and another, and another. And again, this is probably not the final version that you would provide to your end users because this is going to be a little bit messy, but it's so that you functionally understand what's going on. So what we're going to do, the left column will be what resources are going to be consumed, such as resource B, resource D. So these are going to be the resources. These are going to be the corresponding quantities. Now, here's the thing. This is what makes it difficult. We need to have a common field be sent to the update query. So we're not going to make the criteria be this or this. We're going to create one more field, and each of these fields will in turn be set to that field. Or should I say this field will be set to this, and then this field is what gets sent to the query. Sounds a little bit messy, but you'll see in just a second if that explanation wasn't very good. So we're going to create one more field down here, and then we're going to create a button that triggers all this. And we'll do open, but we'll cancel out. We're not going to do that yet. So what we want, when this button gets clicked on, we want a query to run. So let's go ahead and save the form. We'll call this order underscore and underscore update. Button, this is just a caption. Can be whatever you want it. So now the third object is the actual query, and we're going to have to jump back and forth a little bit between the form and the query because you have to create them basically concurrently. So create query. The query is going to be based on the supply table because that's what we're trying to update. We grab our two fields, we drag them down here, and then we choose update because, as I said, it's an update query. What do we want the field to be updated to, and what's the criteria? So the criteria will be the supply because this is the actual field name, and this will be the amount. So let's go back to our form, and actually we need one more. I kind of made a mistake. So as I said, these will be equal to this. These will have to have their own field as well. So create, we need, so we go to home, we go to design view, and we create, so we go to design and we create one more. So sorry about that. So as I said, these will get deposited into here. These will get deposited into here. So now that we have those fields, this and this are going to be put into the actual query. So this is text 8. This is text 11. So text 8 and text 11. Let's go back to our query. So the criteria will be text 8, we said. So build database. It's on the form that we need that. All forms, order and update. And we said it's text 8, and we want the value. So whatever is in text 8 will be the criteria for this update query. And then what's going to be updated to, again, build database. And this time, again, it's the form, sorry. All forms. And this time we said that's text 11. So that should do it for the query. So the criteria is that it's going to use what's in text 8 from the form, and then the updated value will be from text 11. Now, this is actually going to be a calculated field. So we don't actually want to use what's text 11. What we want to use is what's in this field minus what's in text 11. So we're going to do, we're going to cut that, go to build, and this time we're going to navigate to the table, and we're going to do supply amount, and then we're going to say minus what's in text 11. So we don't want to just say what's in text 11 is the value. We're modifying this by what's in text 11. So we save that. We'll just leave this as query 1. Don't feel like naming it. We close the query. And now what we do, so these are the values that are going to be put into the query. So now one at a time, these need to come into here. So how do we do that? We click on our button. We click on Event. We click on Click with the ellipsis, and we choose Code Builder. And so what we're going to do is, as we said, this value needs to be put into here. So me dot, that refers to the object the script is attached to. It's attached to the form. So, well, technically it's attached to the button, but the button is attached to the form. So me dot text8 will be set equal to be me dot text0. You can see it's text 0. So this value has been put into here. Now we're going to run the query. And that's do-cmd, so do command, and it's open query instead of run query. And then you just say which one. Well, it's query 1. You can see over here, it's query run. I usually don't do this kind of split screen, but I usually wind up jumping back and forth to grab these values, so just as well. So what's going to happen, so this receives this value, and then the query runs. Or should I say, this receives this value, and this receives that value. So me dot text 11 is equal to me dot text 2. Again, just grabbing that right from the form. So these values have been set, and then the query will run, and then you just move down. So let's copy all this, and you do it sort of again. This time it's going to be these two fields will get dumped into here. So text 4. So text 8 will be equal to text 4. And this is text 6. So again, text 4, text 6. And then you just run the query again. So we're going to save this. We come back here. So what we need to do, and if this works, we're basically done. Let's change B and D, and we'll change it by, let's see what amount. So let's close this. So we'll do view, and we'll do resource B will be reduced by 50, and resource D will be reduced by just 1. Eventually, you'd want to lock these out so people can't put any numbers in here. So you're going to get several prompts, okay? You do have the ability to shut off prompts, but when you're first testing, those prompts are very important because each one of these should only result in one change. Oops, sorry, that should be a resource D, sorry. So each one of these should only be changing one record. So if you're saying, okay, make this change, and the prompt says it's about to change 4 records, well, that's a problem because you should only be changing 1. So we tend to ignore some of those warnings, some of those advisories, but when you're first designing your database, it's important to pay attention to those because you want to make sure that the change meets the expectation. Because either your expectation is wrong or the code is wrong. So we should get 4 prompts. So you're about to update. So the first query is running, yes, and it's updating 1. Perfect. Second query is running, updating 1. Yes. And now let's go to our supply table. That was reduced by 50. That was reduced by 100. There you go. And now the final step, if we come back to the form, clearly we don't want the end user to have to immediately enter the quantities and the resources that are being consumed. the initial ask was that someone wanted to have the ability to order an object and that these automatically get updated. So the final step, we're going to add a drop-down box, also known as a combo box. And what's going to happen is rather than these being freely editable, where people can manually put in values, what's going to happen when you select the choice from the drop-down box, these will then get pre-filled. So let's look at how to do that. So let's go ahead and click on View, Design View, and we'll add the combo box. So we'll click on this icon up here. We'll draw the size of the combo box. The first option is to have the values of the combo box be derived from a table. You can indeed do that. In fact, long term, you're probably going to want to. That way, if you add or remove anything from that table, the combo box will automatically update. Whereas here, whereas with the second choice, that we're about to do, if we do this, instead, we have to manually enter the values in the combo box. You can make the changes there, but typically it's easier to change a table, not to mention that table is probably feeding out to other queries and other forms as well, whereas this is self-contained. But for now, again, I just want to focus on how making a selection here will change these to predetermined values. So we'll go to Next, widen this column a bit. And again, I'm not going to use actual item names because I don't want you getting confused or distracted. That this process is going to work no matter what you're trying to make. It doesn't matter if it's a cell phone, a power tool, whatever. So we're just going to type in item 1, item 2, item 3, and that's sufficient. We'll do Next. We'll do Finish. And this object is combo 21. So we're going to have to remember that. So with this object selected, we're going to want to look at the properties, and we don't want to use onClick like we did for the button. We don't want something to happen until the value has changed. So you've made a selection, which is a change, and then we want something to execute. So we click on the ellipsis next to onChange. We choose Code Builder. And we're going to put in an if statement. In fact, we're going to put in a bunch of if statements. So there might be a better way to consolidate and streamline this. But again, I'm trying to show you the linkage between the combo box and the other fields on the form. So we're going to use an if statement. So if me dot combo 21, there it is. So if that value is equal to, and you need this exactly right, is equal to item 1, then we'll do end if, so I don't forget to do that. I'm used to coding in C#. In C#, you don't use end if. So if it's equal to item 1, then that means we need to have these take on predetermined values. So this one was text 0, and this was text 2. So we need those to take on certain values. So me dot text 0 equals, and again, we need to use the exact verbiage. I think it was resource 1. Let's go back over to the table. Take a look. Resource A, actually, sorry. So resource A, and we'll say it changes me dot text. Come back here for a second. Text 2 equals, say, 20. And then we want me dot text 4 to be equal to, say, resource D. And me dot text, let's move that over, 6 equals, say, 50. And then end if. So let's test to see if these do indeed change value when we make a selection. So we've saved our code, save our form, go back to view, item 1, and sure enough, now that these are populated, this should work. So let's just check the values. So the current values for it's 1,000 and 399. So we run it. One row is being changed. One row is being changed. And let's go back to supplies. That was reduced by 20, and that was reduced by 50. So I think that gets us to just about where we wanted to be. The ask also had to do with an additional aspect of inventory that if numbers get too low, then new stuff has to be ordered, but I think that's really its own functionality. So I think we can kind of cut off here. I just want to go a little bit further with something I was just showing you. So basically what you would do, you would have your combo box selected, and it's just a matter of adding this all over again. So this is where it gets a little bit tedious. This is what I was saying about maybe there's a better way to try to simplify this. I can't think of any way offhand, so offhand, basically for every single item, you're going to need a block of code. I also only have 2 here. You might have to add a third or a fourth, okay? But that's the nice thing about this. This is what makes this so powerful, is no matter how many different combinations you come up with, this one query will make it work. Because it's taking these values and putting them here. And that the query that's running is actually using these values. And so maybe this is resource B and C, and this is whatever, 120 and 70. And you just go on and on and on. So for each object that needs to be made, you would have to have a block of code. Okay, so I think that just about does it. Again, it doesn't 100% take the request because the request was kind of extensive. It got into ordering of supplies and things like that. So basically what you would need is separately, and this is why I think it should be a separate video, you would have a query that runs against this and checks for values. And if the values are a certain level, then you get a warning that says it needs to be ordered. So I think that should about do it for now. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and say what you'd like to see. I hope this has been helpful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.